Hi, welcome to Tech Beyond Gender podcast. I'm your host, Meena Satishkumar. Today's guest is Jeevan James, a strategic technology leader with over 20 years of experience across banking, insurance, and fintech in New Zealand and globally. With a strong blend of deep technical expertise and commercial acumen, Jeevan has led enterprise scale digital transformation projects, shaping cloud native architecture, DevOps practices, and high performing teams. Today, he joins us to share his insights on how software engineering practices have evolved over the last 2 decades and what it means for the future. Thank you, Jeevan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Meena. Thank you for having me on this podcast. Looking forward to this chat.
Cool, great. Now, the topic that you picked is just like nice software engineering practices. I have experienced both on-prem as well as cloud, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got lots to talk to you about. So I'm quite excited to have this conversation. But before we get into the depths of it, can you
Sure,
take us back to when you first started? What did software engineering in New Zealand look like 20 years ago?
sure. Absolutely. I will actually go back to the time just before I started my career in New Zealand because my
Yeah.
journey of software actually started around 1996, 97 when I started building a website for starting to go to the US. That was my aspiration then. And I was building a website to help provide information and build apps, a desktop app to help you train for that exam. And that was my journey while I was studying. And then I started in 2000 here doing a postgraduate diploma in computer science. And I kept working on that on the side while I was trying to break into the industry here. I initially struggled to get a software job. It was sort of like you needed experience to get that first job. And I found I was being offered tester type roles at that time rather than a software engineer, but I was clear on what I was trying to achieve. So I started off actually on a help desk working at the warehouse. And at that time, they used to rely on vendor partners to build their core systems. And my experience and exposure there was large projects, lots of people getting involved, and um, little, IP internally. But then through that journey, so that was my first exposure. But then I got a chance to join Sony New Zealand, and really that's when agile was coming to the fore. But interestingly enough, that wasn't a term we used. But when I think of the time that we worked there, it was a small team, cross-functional team in terms of developers working, testing one another's code, trying to develop solutions. A really interesting time in terms of very close to the business. So my experience was in New Zealand. It was local teams, smaller teams. There were few consultancies and larger companies as well, but my exposure was initially working in this business unit, serving that business. Um, Agile before it really became that buzzword of agile. So I found that a really interesting experience way back then. And a lot has changed over the years. Some things have remained the same. Some things have certainly changed through various product companies that I worked with, working with international, offshore teams as well as onshore teams in New Zealand. But it was a fairly small industry from my personal experience. It was niche, relatively niche as well then. It wasn't as prevalent as it is today, where tech is everywhere. It's not seen as an add-on. It's a key business enabler. Happy to chat more about any of those things if you keen to hear more about them.
Yeah. I want to go back to your website that you were developing in 1996. What happened to that?
I decided to come. So it was for the graduate record examination. So it was that was to study your master's in the States. So I built that while preparing. I used my peer group to help um, with ideas and information for how you prepare to get into that um, to apply for university postgraduate study in the States. So I developed, as I said, applications to help people prepare for exams. The graduate record examination was an exam that you prepared for. And I was building the stuff in VB6, but also the
Wow.
website was really about informational. It was about um, how do you choose universities? How do you prepare for entrance examinations? And it was all using my own experience and my peer group. So um, when I came to New Zealand, I still continued to offer, I'd still get requests from people preparing for that exam, but I started to find that I was further away from that world and it no longer made sense. I did actually sell that to a US business that was selling testing software. So they wanted access to the market, and my site was actually one of the top 5 that used to appear if you search for GRE at that time. This was early 2000. Yeah, so I sold that and looked for a permanent job here in New Zealand.
Okay, cool. So you came here as a student, did you? Like,
I did. I'd done my engineering back in India, looking to do postgraduate study in the States. But then my family, I was a 21-year-old then, so I could come in under a New Zealand um, parent visa, so as a dependent child. And so I studied my postgraduate study at Auckland Uni here.
gosh, I actually, I've had conversations with you in the past, but I should tell you, your face just sparked talking about this. Obviously, you're quite passionate on this specific topic about the industry and how it has evolved and your journey in it as well. So, what was your first job like in New Zealand where you like sort of hands on? Was it like I remember you mentioned it was testing? Now, when did you actually get into a software engineering role? What was your first role like?
I started at a help desk. I actually didn't take that testing job, so that was an interesting bit as well. So I did a help desk job at the warehouse for 18 months while I was trying to find a software engineering role. And I was offered a permanent role as a tester, and I was offered a 1-month contract as a developer at Sony. I took the 1-month contract. I ended up being there for 6 years
Wow.
because I knew I wanted to be a software engineer, and I took that first role. It was a leap of faith. I remember after that interview, I thought I'd done terribly because I felt like the person who eventually did hire me was looking for more. And all my examples were of pet projects I'd done, things that I had tried to learn. And eventually I realized that's what he valued and that's what he was looking for. And actually, um, when you don't have experience, it's about trying. It's about demonstrating that you have a desire, a passion, and you're willing to learn by trying. So when I got to Sony, it was VB6 days. Well, way back then, .NET was just coming out, but it was building websites, scripting. Interesting journey. I was there 6 years, right? And we built applications for that business. We ran as a New Zealand business entirely. So corporate, Sony didn't exert influence on the software in the early days. Eventually, that did become a thing. We were aligned to Australia. So the business came with a problem. They used to appear as sticky notes on my boss's whiteboard that was behind him of all the requests for work that they wanted to get done. Each of those sticky notes might be 3 months worth of work or things like that. So it was very agile. We didn't have, written specs. It was a conversation with those business stakeholders, trying to understand what they were trying to achieve, work with them to deliver an outcome, and then see if it met their needs and evolve and adapt. So that was my first experience learning from a senior, learning how to write SQL queries, how to develop. I'd never done VB6 before. I had learned other programming languages, but you learn by doing. If you love it enough, you will come home and do more of it and try. And that's really what I did. It was not work. It was fun. I just enjoyed what I was doing.
How much it has changed now, right? Coding or like designing a website.
Absolutely, it's become the way I see it though. It sort of goes in cycles, and I feel that at least through my journey of software, right, it was generalist. You kind of had to do everything from understanding the requirements, designing the solution, developing it, even testing. You test one another's work, right? End-to-end life cycle. In later on in my career, it moved to more specialist. You were a developer coding, and there was someone else who did requirements gathering, a BA typically, and then you had an architect and things like that. I feel, I sense like with an AI, world that we are moving to, there is more of that, T-shaped person, but it's really AI augmented human who can do a lot of that requirements gathering, designing, building. So it's about how do you deliver an outcome rather than how do I just write code. So it's changing, but that's where I feel 20 years later, maybe that's the next wave again where, um, people who understand how systems can work can deliver solutions. You don't have to be a specialist because AI writes the code for you. We'd be going down the path of talking about AI because that's, again, another area that I love to talk about. Obviously, on a journey myself there. So happy to talk more about that as well as we go along.
So with requirements gathering, right? At the moment I can't see how AI can be used for requirements gathering. We still need people to actually go and talk to others about what the needs are, what the problems are, what do they want, what are they looking for as solution, right? Obviously, with the collected information, we can use AI tool maybe to summarize stuff. But how do you see AI as how we could use that for business requirements?
So interestingly, we've been having conversations in my current company as well as to how we can enhance how we do requirements gathering and things like that, right? And we looked at how we could use an agent, right, to help frame the problem, move away from solution definition to problem statements to really think about what are you trying to achieve. But it's, for me, the key is communication. It's a conversation. You're absolutely right. What you're saying is people want to talk to somebody, and it's teasing out the information that isn't said. It's getting them to think about things that they may not think of, where, just based on Q&A prompts. It's about understanding their environment, the context, and you do that, at least today. The tech isn't quite there, right? You do require that human to have that conversation. But where the tool comes in is it's easy to turn transcripts into docs or prototypes, where you can spit out, UIs that kind of visualize what it is. You no longer need to go back, to your computer, spend weeks mocking something up to then ask, is this what you want, right? That cycle has shortened considerably. And also, I think it has broadened the number of people who could have that conversation. It isn't just, a I think personally, it doesn't just have to be a PA. It's developer, a QA, a product owner. Um, any person can, but obviously the specialists in that area help frame how it's done. But the tools are then available for people to have good conversation.
Hmm.
That's the key to then identify what is the problem you're trying to solve. What might an outcome look like? So yeah, I do think communication is key to how we use AI to get the most out of it.
Yeah. Cool. So, since you have started, right, like 20 years ago, how do you think solution engineering has changed, like software engineering? You did touch a bit on the agile side of things and stuff. Let's go to actually agile side of things. What is your perspective on it? Like you mentioned, like you were a generalist when you started. You did the requirement gathering, designing the solution. You were a developer. You were a tester, and now we have those specialized roles. Have we complicated the whole scenario? Was it easier back then? Are we taking much longer to finish projects now?
I I do think for a period it has gotten really specialized, and there was a lot of value in that collaboration and the ability to own the end-to-end SDLC, right? But to scale and also bring a bit more rigor and discipline in larger organizations, you do require different areas of specialization. It's not practical for every you know, developer, for example, to go off and just work with the business to understand what they're doing, deliver. But I think depending on how you structure your teams and how you organize into units, there is more that can be done, right? But I do feel, um, yes, sometimes over um, specializing or creating silos is a barrier to collaboration. And, there have been various techniques around that. There was BDD, that really behavior driven development. There was Three Amigos. There were various techniques to try and break down those silos to help move um, the teams to have a collective understanding of what it is that you were developing, testing, or solutioning. And they have worked to different degrees, but it's a level of maturity that teams go through. I've seen through, the agile wave working with a bank, really in a heavily regulated environment, right? They still made this move, and this was for me. This was in the 2010 to 2015 onwards. They really made that move, and I think there was huge excitement to how teams even working on mainframes and things like that were really working on um, agile methodologies and how you brought um, minimum viable product. Really, in some cases, it's just not possible, right? You can't release too often when you've got core systems. So you do have to balance that, but it has brought about a lot of um, change in terms of how we get software out the door. But back to your point around, are there challenges with being too specialized? Well, I think AI is forcing that equation already. You've put a very powerful tool in the hands of the common man, to be honest, and it's how it's used. There's a lot for us to still adapt, learn how we adapt and do it. But I think a more generalist type approach to systems thinking around how you develop a solution using the tool that can build where you're helping guide the outcome. So I think we're going full circle. That's my personal experience, at least in the 20, 25 years that I've been in the industry.
Nice. So when I have not worked very much in the software space, but I've worked in the infrastructure area. And with the infrastructure area, I think it was in 2020, I was in a team with on-prem stuff where we were deploying and managing on-prem infrastructures. And I remember with one project, we had to we were going to upgrade the server. And wow, that was a huge, massive project. It took us a year or so just for upgrading one Windows server to another Windows
Yeah.
server and making sure all the files and applications were copied across. And it took a lot of people's time and energy that one year. And then once soon after that, in a month or so, I moved into another team where it was more in AWS cloud environment.
Right.
And instantly I was exposed to services where we could just spin up a server just like that and maybe try and install a Python package. And if something didn't work, we would just destroy that just like that and create another instance, right? It was just such a contrast where things could be much more quicker, delivery was much more easier, and you can actually afford to make mistakes and learn and move
Yeah.
on. Like, how was it in software engineering? I'm sure you would have noticed a stark contrast of that nature, right?
Um, it's really interesting that you talk about server upgrades and things like that, because to be transparent, those challenges still exist today. Because
Yeah.
of some software built 30 years ago that still runs and works. So in my career, I have worked on greenfields operations, startup type environments where you're building from scratch, where having the cloud, for example, is just, we just take it for granted today, right? But it was transformational when I experienced it as well, because exactly as you're describing, you could stand up resources, tear it down, create copies, create versions, blue green
Mhm.
deployments, deploying um, frequently and often. You could
Yeah.
do that with the modern tech, and you
Mhm.
could fix forward, right? You never rolled back. It was just you deployed the next version because you had telemetry that would tell you if something was wrong, so you could keep moving forward. But the reality is, it's not been a sequential approach for me. It has
Mhm.
depended on who I've worked for, right? And um, I, you know, it's common knowledge, right, that the banks, the insurance companies have systems that have been around a very long time, legacy estate, but they work, right,
Yeah.
and they have they deliver value today. So sometimes you have to work on that old tech, and
Mhm.
I had to run teams that are running those old tech. So you try and leverage, um, you know, techniques we've developed for the cloud and thinking, but not all of it translates in how you can retrospectively add it for on-prem legacy applications. But you still try and automate most things like deployments, right? You can use various scripting technologies to try and automate things. Um, so it's adapting things where you don't have the luxury of the cloud, but also generally where in the places that I've worked, they've moved from hosting to private cloud, but it's still hosted infrastructure that is legacy tech from years ago, and it's still in existence. It still runs a lot large parts of the business. So I still deal with that today, right? So my world is still a hybrid of cloud as well as legacy infrastructure and tech, and we still do have those problems of
Yeah.
upgrading infrastructure and having to run an outage over a weekend to try and just move the operating system to a later version. And you're trying to get these systems that were, kind of out of date 15 years ago to still run today, right? but the fundamentals of software haven't changed dramatically, right? Some of the things, at its core, it's logic, right? So the way I look at it, I've had to, um, I drive different levels, right? I operate at a strategic level, um, but sometimes you do need to sit with an engineer looking at code on their desk. And it's about logic. I don't understand the syntax, but it's working with somebody saying, what about this? If we do this, what will that look like? And you're helping them frame how they might troubleshoot issues for software that was built years ago, was probably outdated before I started my career as well. But it's still technology that delivers value till we can replace it. We support it and run it. But clearly, the cloud has made things a lot more fun for engineers. And I, you know, it's hard to get anyone to go back in time, right? The digital natives, the ones who've grown up, only building in the cloud, talking about on-prem is alien to them, right? It's very hard to get them to go back in time to, I have to worry about IaaS and how the services, managing memory, all those things that you just take for granted in the cloud via configuration, you still have to deal with. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I agree. Like I've worked in environments as well where you have cloud as well as some really, really old on-prem. No one really knows exactly, especially with data warehousing, right? No one really
Yeah,
understands the logic behind the data, and they're just so scared to even think about upgrading those systems because they're like, oh my God, what if it breaks? And I have regulatory reporting, and my license to operate will be snatched if something breaks. Yeah, it's a fine line.
absolutely. I guess here's what the promise of AI is, back to AI, what it kind of offers us today, right? How we could re-engineer, re-architect solutions, even if we didn't have the code. Still trying to prove those things out, but that's the hope, that we can upgrade those systems that we were afraid to touch, hard to understand what was going on. We're now actually running POCs to try and understand what those systems did, rather than trusting what some engineer who built it a long time ago believes it does. You're getting the system to tell you. Um, so that's really interesting, and that's offering new
Yeah,
opportunities as well.
yeah, exactly. So you have obviously worked in technology and then you've moved into people role, like obviously few years back, I assume. Now, beyond technology, when you look at people and culture, like how have the engineering team cultures and expectations of engineers changed or evolved over time?
I think it's changed a lot. It's, if you think of, um, when I reflect back, what a good engineer was, right, in the early 2000s, or around that period. It was someone who was considered technically astute. They knew the syntax inside out, didn't need to read documentation. They just knew how to write that code. And it was about how quickly you churn things out, right? How, of course, quality was important, but it was throughput. That was the measure. Um, Communication was seen as, some people used to do it well, but it wasn't a general expectation of, um, you know, being being the person who spoke to the business and stuff like that. Through the years, as agile um, processes and practices became commonplace, it became more important that communication was really, really key. So this started to become a shift today, right? It's not about delivery from a software we deliver. Technology delivers some business application. It's about technology delivering a business outcome. That's the expectation of our business today, right? So that requires engineers to think quite differently. It isn't just about solving a problem technically. It's about how is it going to impact the customer or the business users. That level of awareness is is a given today. So when we talk to engineers and have conversations about what the business is trying to achieve, we start with the why. It isn't about we need to build system X. We're going to write out a whole bunch of requirements. When someone signs it off, we'll have a conversation about how we can deliver that outcome. Right? That's what it used to be like. That's completely changed. I think even the role of CIOs and CTOs today, right? They are about enabling business value. Previously, you'd have CTOs and things like that reporting to CEO. That shift as well, where they're at the senior most table, is a reflection of what business expects, and that filters through. I know your question was around how has it changed for software engineers, but really, I think it has changed for every layer. Um, More is expected of us to think business outcomes rather than just I'm building some application. It's about how is this going to be used? How will it deliver value? Um, and how's it going to make a difference, really?
Yeah. So now, besides the team culture, have you noticed any difference in diversity within the industry as such? Are there any gaps that you still find?
Yeah. I so I think we've come a long way, but there are still I think there's more to do, right? If I reflect back on what it was like in the early 2000s, it was very male dominated, right? But also, if you think of representation of other minorities, there were very few and far between. I over time though, through my career, I have started to see a lot of change. There's a reasonable Asian population, Indian subcontinent population, people out of the Middle East and other areas. So ethnic diversity has started to show up. Gender diversity clearly has started to show up as well, and it's starting to be reflected in leaders. Right, when I started out, it was male Pakeha generally, right? Were the leaders who you reported into. Over my career, I've had a number of leaders, but most recently, it's been two women leaders, right? That's the difference. It just wasn't that way 15, even 10 years ago. So in my personal experience, it has changed, but there's still as you go further up the chain, right, the level of diversity, all types of, upbringings, gender, ethnicity, and other differences um, are still the exception, not the norm. But I think it is definitely moving in a direction where um, the generation coming through now can see leaders, who are different, and it's not seen as different, right? It's seen as natural, really. So we have, I guess, in our positions as well, no longer the anomaly, right? We're part of what is fairly common now, but I think New Zealand still lacks equality in that sense, if there was such a thing. But we're making progress. I certainly have seen a lot has changed, but I think there's more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was interesting. We were talking about women leaders, right? I don't. Yeah, I have noticed as well. There are women leaders in workplaces where I've been as well. But I'm a architect, solution architect, and like even I work as a contractor. I don't think there are many women solution architects in general, as well as
Yes.
in contracting. You don't really find any. And in my team where I am in, I'm the only female solution architect. And all of the conversations I have, if I am having any meetings with infrastructure or security teams or networking teams, it's just me there as women, right? But I do see women in as like project managers or BAs or testers, and
Yes.
or like product owners, for instance, platform managers. So I just sort of feel that for some reason, women do shy away from those technical roles, and it's probably easier to navigate to a leadership or a strategy role as opposed to growing in a technical role. What is your perception about it?
I I actually you're right, right? At a macro level, the numbers have increased, right? But when you look at the specific disciplines, it is prevalent today as well. I see it in our own organization, right? We've been fortunate that we've had a good mix of women in various leadership positions. But you're spot on. If I think of our infra teams, um, it's male dominated. If I look at testers, it is skewed towards women, whereas the software engineers tend to be more men. Although to be fair, I think our team is fairly diverse, but maybe we're the exception. But you're right. Like our BA team was almost entirely women, right? Um, the project managers have been a mix. I I'm not sure entirely why that is the case, but I think it is just I think it's time. You know, we're at least starting to see more women in technology teams, and I think we've had a lot of overseas women as well. You know, it's not been um, just you know Kiwis, etc. It's been a mix of skills. So I do feel maybe there's just more work to be done to kind of show women that a career in tech has various dimensions to it. It's not just the key ones that you see. Um, it's like data centers and things like that, right? It's not common to see women leading or working in the technical roles there. I I want to do my bit, I guess. That's why I've volunteered to be a mentor, um, really with Tech Beyond Gender, because I do see what you're saying. I I wish there was some magic wand that we could wave to make it happen, but it's gonna take people collectively starting to recognize that there's gaps and how we can kind of create opportunities where we wouldn't otherwise, um, have that level of diversity.
Yeah, I really feel that it's more a collective social mindset which is driving this rather than just organizations doing anything specifically. Because
Yeah,
I have heard of instances where small girls at schools just say that, okay, coding is for boys, not for girls.
yeah,
It's like, where are they getting those ideas from, right? So if our kids are growing up with these ideas, then obviously they are going to restrict themselves to the roles that they would want to pursue in technology as well.
agree. And I think you're right there as well, right? It starts in school. It's about introducing tech to our kids in a safe way to help them understand, because then you are evening the field, right? Because you're giving opportunity. I do feel I'm not an expert on the education system per se, but it's just having kids going through school, I can see that there's a lot more that they could do, right? It feels like tech is introduced far later in, you know, the kids' journey, whereas um, they're using devices at home, for example, right? Why can't we teach them about software and how a career in tech might look, what it might look like? Introducing them really early, I do think there's more that could be done in that space, and yeah, I'm keen to kind of get involved there as well, to see how I can make a difference on the kids' boards, kids' schools. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what skills or mindsets are essential for engineers today, and how it has changed in the last 20 years?
So key thing for me is communication. It's more important than ever. Being able to communicate clearly, not just with humans, but even with AI, right? As an example, it's not just being looking for a solution. It's identifying what are the different options that might exist. So uh, communication is number one. I think dealing with ambiguity. I think there is um, a lot of complexity with distributed systems, integration. It's the boundaries where the challenges lie. You know, um, talking about software and complex systems that we've built and supported, that I have been involved with as well. It's often the downstream systems, so it's really systems thinking, understanding how information flows, how the data flows. That is another key element of what a good software engineer needs to think of, because tasks around specific bits of functionality, that's being automated away from engineers. But under systems thinking is where you differentiate yourself. And the last one, I think, is just as important 20, 25 years ago. It's continuous learning, right? When I was in uni, right, the languages I learned were irrelevant when I got my first job. As I kind of said right at the start, I was programming in a language that I'd never learned before. Through my career, languages have changed. Um, Various um, technologies have come and gone. So it's your ability to learn and keep learning and adapting and growing. As a technologist, you're, you know, the moment you're building something, it's really legacy, right? It's something else is going to come and replace it. So you have to evolve and adapt and keep learning. So really back to the four things that I think are really important for software engineers: communication, dealing with ambiguity, systems thinking, the integration piece, as well as continuous learning mindset, because um, the the tools and the technology we might be using in 4 or 5 years are probably not even built today. They they're yet to be imagined.
Mm. When you were just saying all this, like systems thinking and being able to continuously learn and adapt and stuff, how do you think AI has enabled this for our engineers these days?
So, in terms of AI per se, I think where it is today, it's um, it's really good at specific tasks, right? Around building applications from scratch, ability to kind of understand what is there and how that might be improved. I think the context aware of where a system fits in a broader ecosystem is not um, fully understood or nailed by AI yet today. So I think what AI is giving us is the ability to focus on those complex interactions and the context, while it can do each system on its own. It looks at that really well. So I think um, the the fundamentals of how a solution is built, that AI is doing really well. How it interacts with existing systems, how that kind of all fits together in a wider ecosystem. I think that's where good engineers still play a real part today. So they're not looking to create boilerplate code, right? That has been, it's easy to get started. It's so much easier to create something today to try and prove value. So I think engineers are moving to, what problem can I solve? How could I create a better experience? And how can I use AI to give me options to deliver more value? So you can create a lot more today using AI, but I still think there's a way to go before all of that in complex environments could be fully automated.
Yeah. So, what excites you about AI?
I think it's just the fact that it's such a disruptive technology. We're having to reimagine how we work. It's like, what is the SDLC today, right? The SDLC is kind of software development lifecycle, really, what I'm talking about. You've got to reimagine how we put software together. It has short-circuited things that might have been, we run this phase and we do another phase. It has compressed that. So that's really exciting as an engineer. It's sort of looking at, as an engineer, I see myself as a builder of parts, right? AI has disrupted those component parts and how they fit together. So it's about, how could you reimagine the way we put things together to create something that hasn't been created before. Also, the ability to, I think, look at multiple ways to generate data, for example. You don't have to start from scratch, right? Often when you would, in the past, you'd build systems till the users used the system, and you'd got, I don't know, 3 to 6 months worth of data. Sometimes you didn't fully appreciate how it might be. We no longer have those excuses. It's really exciting from that perspective, where you can fast track what the life cycle of a product could be in 6 months to probably a year to 2 years, to say, how should the system behave in that environment, and get AI to help you identify where it might fall down. The system might not work as you expected, and change how you have built that system. So AI, I guess, is creating new opportunities. I think it is also shifting the balance of power to our users today, right? Come to us with solutions saying, I knock something up. This is what I'm looking for. What can you do? It's you know it's become really a universal tool, where technology is in everyone's hands today. It's like the mobile phone kind of was that disruptive technology as well, right? It put like your laptop in your hand. It's really, today everyone has an engineer at their disposal. They don't need to talk to a software engineer to prove an idea. That's really exciting, because I feel, as software engineers who've been in the industry, we need to step up to the next level to demonstrate how we deliver value. Why would a business user need to talk to us in tech or software engineers to build something, when the promise of AI is, I could do this myself? So how do we provide value to those individuals? So I'm really excited about that. It's, I guess, creating new opportunities, quicker ways to deliver value, and reimagining things that we took, um, you know, for granted for so many years, right? We've had step changes, but I think this is a huge step change in terms of where it's going next.
Yeah. So now, leading on, what advice would you give to someone entering the industry now?
I think the fundamentals are still really important. Understanding how the software operates at a at a system level as well. You don't need to, like, for example, um, you know, back in the day, you didn't have to know how the compiler worked, right? But knowing how a compiler optimizes things was useful information. I see some of that, like, you don't necessarily need to know all of the syntax, but it's understanding what is good look like. When code is generated, AI can generate a lot of code. So knowing the fundamentals of software still are really important. I think investing in communication skills, as I've said, I think that is a given, right? You are expected to be able to speak to the business like you understand the business and are part of the business. You're not just tech, you're part of the business. So communication skills are really important. And I think, um, you know, self-belief and trying, that's
Mhm.
what I think I would be giving new grads today. Try, because you can do today at home what senior engineers were doing years ago, right? The bar has changed. So the challenge then is to demonstrate, how did you break what AI did? What how did you validate that it is right? What are the options it came up with? I think that is the key to coming up with innovative solutions, new ways of thinking to develop your craft. I think that's what good engineers in the future are going to be valued for, right? Their communication skills, they understand how the system works, and they can think of what AI wasn't prompted to do. It's finding the boundaries, validating, because we have to inspect and adapt like we did with software, right? The life cycle of software, it's still understanding how the system behaves and then adapting. I think that's key. The
Yeah.
worst thing you can have is no engineer being able to read what AI has written, and it gets into a mess over time, right? I can imagine times like we have, we talk about technical debt, right? In the past, it is foreseeable that you would end up in the similar situation where the AI is changing over time and is developing new ways to do things, and the old is sort of treated like technical debt by some old AI. That's an interesting problem to have, but that's where I think good engineers understand how software is being built, how it's run, how the AI is building things to then develop better solutions.
How do you stay abreast of AI, especially you with a family and having a really responsible role at work? How do you keep yourself abreast?
So I just enjoy reading. I enjoy listening to podcasts, and I my new or rather for a little while, it's been also watching video clips of new technologies and what people are doing. Right, so um, it's like if you're driving in the car, might be listening to a podcast, just learning, hearing about things. I listen to leadership podcasts, listen to new ideas in tech, what's going on. I watch videos and I try, right? Because it's what I love doing. For me, um, it's how I relax in a funny way. I I want things to stimulate me, so I get stimulated by new ideas, new things, then having conversations with people about it. So I like to put into um, practice what I'm learning, so it makes it for more interesting conversations. So yes, it is hard, and you know you I rely on my wife obviously, you know, for support with the kids, and it's busy. She's got her own career as well, and we try and balance that. But things are changing rapidly, right? So it's investing time to learn, and I do that. I like yeah, I find the podcasts really stimulating, but sometimes actually sitting at a computer, I I find the best way to try things, to test ideas and see what others are doing. So also industry events, like learning from others by meeting people, hearing about problems they're solving, um, is what really I think I'm assimilating information, trying to give back as well to hopefully um, improve our lot collectively, right? And how we solve problems. I just like learning. That's why I keep doing that, and I guess that's expected as of technology professionals today. The
Yeah.
tech is changing so quickly. If you are, I feel we have a privilege. It's a privilege that we, you know, have the journey we've been on with the past or how it was. Our kids don't understand that. They start at a point in time and then you learn forward, right? That's called experience. And I think that is valuable. The lessons from the past do help with decisions you make in the future. And so I feel having that experience and continuing to learn and adapt is enriching, and well, it gives me joy because I love it. That's what I enjoy doing.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jeevan. Thanks for your time. It was a lovely conversation and it was great to get your perspective and lovely to hear your experience as well. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts to our listeners?
Um, my thoughts would be just it's a time when there's a lot that's changing in the world and in tech. I think it's about seeing the opportunity, the roles that will exist in the next few years and beyond probably don't exist today. So it's looking at your core skills and looking at how you can adapt, I think is key. So really, I guess my message is to anyone starting out, but people also who've been in the industry who might be worried about what is ahead. I think look at it as an opportunity. We have an opportunity to try something really new that keeps it fresh and interesting. So take take that as an opportunity to learn and develop your skills. And if you want help, you know, reach out. That's really, I guess, um, avenues like Tech Beyond Gender connect people, create opportunity if someone wants to get help. And I've put my hand up to be part of the solution. So really willing to help anyone who wants support.
Great. Thank you, Jeevan. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Meena.